Welcome to Follow to Lead, where we discover how to listen for and follow God's call so that we might lead others to God. Our shared stories of inspiration from religious leaders and those active in the educational ministry of the church can help you know better how God is calling you and the role passionate Catholic education plays in spreading His message of faith, hope, and love. Now please welcome the hosts of Follow to Lead, Father Randy Sly and Kyle Pietrantonio.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Christ the teacher, teach us to listen. Teach us to do the deep listening to the sounds of our soul, waiting to hear your voice, calling us to cast out deeper, to become fishers of men and women, shepherds of souls, to follow your will in order to lead others to the truth, beauty, and goodness only you can offer. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Amen.
Welcome to Follow to Lead, a journey twice a month into the world of Catholic education and our faith, exploring what it means to follow God in order to lead others to Him. I'm Father Randy Sly, your host. And today we will be talking with Jonathan Doyle. And Jonathan is an international Catholic speaker, author, businessman, and executive coach from Canberra, Australia. How did I do on the pronunciation?
That was pretty close. I will give you a pass on that. That was well done.
Okay. Yeah, I've been working on that instead of Canberra,
Correct. Well
which
done.
I've heard in North America a lot. So,
Yeah.
but in Canberra, and he has spoken around the world to more than 500,000 people on topics related to Catholic education, our Catholic charism and identity, leadership, teacher well-being, and much more. He's been a keynote speaker for the National Catholic Education Association National Convention and a frequent keynote speaker in the U.S., Asia, and Europe. He's also founder of an international education and media business that delivers training content to hundreds of organizations and thousands of individuals around the world each week. And this includes one particular program called Going Deeper Catholic Teacher Formation. And this is used by hundreds of Catholic schools every year. Jonathan holds an undergraduate degree in education from the University of Canberra, a master's degree in educational leadership and management from the University of Newcastle, and has undertaken postgraduate study in philosophical anthropology with the John Paul II Pontifical Institute. He's the author of 4 books on relationships and peak performance. One in particular that I really want him to talk about is the book Tools and Fuels: How Catholic Teachers Can Become Saints, Beat Burnout, and Save the World. Boy, if we can do all that, we are in great shape. Anyway,
Amen.
each day he also shares a lot of these ideas with a large global audience on his daily podcast. So, Jonathan, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Father Andy. That was a wonderful introduction. I couldn't have expressed it better myself. But look, stoked to be here. It's a real privilege to have some time with you and to hopefully offer something that's a blessing to your listeners.
Well, I'm looking forward to this and have been ever since we started talking about getting this together. I think you are definitely the largest or longest distance guest on Follow to Lead. So I'm glad to have you here from Australia. Of course, our time differences are pretty radical, but we were able to make it work. So what we do at the beginning of every program is give our guests an opportunity to just tell a little bit about themselves. So could you kind of give us a little background on your upbringing and that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, it was a difficult journey. And I'm pretty honest about this sometimes when I'm speaking live. Raised in a Catholic home, but went through some pretty traumatic experiences as a child, in terms of abuse and things like that. And I was lucky that I kind of had a very strong reconversion, through a Catholic sort of evangelical charismatic community in my early 20s, which had a huge impact. And I also managed to do a gap year. I don't know if you have something similar in the States, but I spent a year at a Jesuit boarding school in England, which also had quite a big effect on me. And so those were key experiences. And then, like every successful man I know, I married way above my pay grade. And been married to Karen now for almost 24 years. And so, she's been a huge stabilizing influence on me. And yeah, so that's the background. There were some real difficulties there. And I think, God's done a lot of work over many, many years. And I think that's why the faith's been so central to me, just in terms of that healing. And as many people know, that healing is ongoing. But yeah, raised Catholic, powerful reconversion. And then, as they say, the rest is history. Been very much committed to that journey ever since.
What drew you to really kind of focus on Catholic education, even as you began some of your undergraduate studies?
There's a great line actually from a Protestant pastor that I really like, Christine Kane, and she said, that you can tell when an idea is from God when you try to leave it alone, but it won't leave you alone. And so, I started in education. I was teaching for 18 months, but I figured out really a little bit longer, maybe a couple of years, and I figured out really quickly that there were enormous systemic problems. And I loved working with young people very, very much, and had a huge heart for them. But I realized that, particularly in Australia, there was a great deal of exhaustion, burnout, cynicism. And I think I figured out pretty early that the vocational aspect, like, it's not a job. Like, if you approach it that way, the emotional, psychological, spiritual drain is too much for people. And so I figured out that the real issue wasn't the kids. Like, the kids were facing cultural issues, technology, family breakdown. Those are real things. But what we needed were men and women who were what the church documents refer to as convinced and coherent. I always like that phrasing, that they were convinced that the Catholic proposition was ideal for humanity, and that they were coherent, not perfect, but coherent in their lifestyle. So I kind of just figured out that if we could support teachers more, we were reaching young people. We were more likely to reach young people effectively. So, sometimes they're like sheep without a shepherd. Teachers need encouragement. They need to be reminded constantly that they're doing something profound, because we live in a culture where, with all our influences and celebrities, I often joke with teachers. I say, finish this sentence. When you introduce yourself as a teacher, how often do you say, "Oh, I'm just a teacher," and helping them reclaim some of the power of that vocation. And I spoke in Boise, Idaho a few years ago, and Bishop Peter there said something quite extraordinary when he said, he was speaking to the teachers during my introduction, and he said, "All you teachers," he said, "you've got to stop trying to make Jesus unemployed." And so, if it is truly vocational, when I'm teaching teachers, I talk about those three levels of vocation. We've all got the vocation as a son or daughter adopted into the household of God. Then we have our state of life, married, religious, single life. And then we have this third level of vocation, which is what we're called to in life, what we're called to do. And I was literally teaching on that in Tasmania last week. There's a great quote from Henry Newen, just on that vocational piece, that the vocational aspect of our life is being worked out in the concrete circumstances of our life. So I've just been trying to remind teachers that what looks like a classroom, what looks like all the interactions of teaching and education, probably have a much greater spiritual profundity than teachers often realize.
It's interesting when you think about how many hours in a day a student spends with their teacher, with
Yeah,
respect to how much that time they spend at home. And
yeah,
teachers have an amazing opportunity for mission,
yeah,
formation, impact,
yeah,
all of that.
yeah. There's a great line from John Baptiste de la Salle, which I think I shared it at the NCA convention, where he said, "Young people need teachers like visible angels." So I often have a bit of a joke with teachers. I say, "Did you realize that when from now on, when you go to like a barbecue or a dinner, you can now introduce yourself as a visible angel, get a business card with it printed on it." You make a great point. There is, I think Evelyn Underhill said this, that when you scratch beneath the surface with modern young people, on the surface, there's an appearance of worldliness and and strength, and often there can be a kind of Teflon exterior. But Evelyn Underhill said, when you scratch beneath the surface, you find depths of loneliness and uncertainty and confusion that you didn't know existed. And so great teachers, just on the pastoral level, the ability to build friendships, just to build appropriate, healthy, a fundamental disposition that you care about young people. Aquinas's definition of love, to will the good of the other. So I say to teachers, you're not going to like everybody. You are not going to like every student. You're a human person. You're not going to, but you can love them, which means you can have a fundamental disposition that they flourish, that they grow. I just think for as long as this system continues, this education system as we currently have it, good Catholic teachers can do remarkable things.
I couldn't agree more. I think about the 5 marks of Catholic education by Archbishop Miller in that great Vatican document. And one of the things he stresses is community, that really you're building community in a school. It's I know that Kyle Pietrantonio from Duke and Altum, our executive director, likes to talk about the school as parish.
Yeah.
There's a life there that is in and of itself just a special community.
So true. And when I was in Tasmania a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to the head of their IT for Catholic education there, and they're rolling out a new system across the state. They do a great job, but we're talking about just the levels of complexity and things that teachers constantly have to deal with. And it really led me to think deeply about the nature of the education system in this country, particularly. So my take in terms of what's happening is, I call it the simple equation. So this is how I explain burnout and exhaustion to teachers. I say the simple equation is you have an environment of increasing complexity and demand coexisting simultaneously in an environment of finite human resources. So we've got more complexity, but finite time. And so what I'm getting at here is this system is going to break. So my take on the current education system, which is really instantiated by, it's basically the Prussian military model that was, funded by the Rockefellers in the early 20th century. And as that begins to break down, I'm saying to teachers that you can't do much to change that, the structural issues that we're facing. But what you can do, and this is where I'm speaking to your point, is you can create a community where people want to come. You can't fix the demands from government. You can't fix the technology pressures. But what you can do is say, right, we are going to build a community here where we want to come to work and where young people want to come. And the example I give teachers is I show them images of Lindisfarne and Iona, the 10th, 11th century monastic communities off the coast of the United Kingdom. And those were communities of 40 to 50 men and women. And those little communities built places of sacrament, prayer, fellowship. And they sent out saints like Aidan and, Columbanus, and they re-evangelized Europe. So a healthy, holy Catholic community, educational community, can do an enormous amount in culture by focusing on just that, not fixing everything outside of itself, but becoming saints in that little community.
It's interesting. I've been to Lindisfarne and been and seen the same things that you were talking about. And it's interesting that their philosophy was small pods of young people that they would form, and then they would take and transplant that to another place. So there were these little pods all over England and even into Europe, where they were forming these small groups of young people and it was very effective, and in spite of how the governments were very different in parts of the countries. So
yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned pods of young people, because if you look at the work of someone like Maria Cavalletti, who was kind of the progenitor of the catechesis of the Good Shepherd stuff, the Catholic Montessori approach. Like, they talk about sensitive periods. They talk about in the formation and development of young people, there are these sensitive periods, these windows in which they are more open to the Spirit. And there's that piece. And also years ago, I heard a really good educator talk about one of the reasons why World Youth Day is so important is because there's a natural hunger in the hearts of young people for tribe, belonging, and journey together. And so what I'm trying to put together here is that the well-formed young people coming through really healthy Catholic schools, they're going to be the saints of the next generation. And because if you look at the kind of Marxist indoctrination in much of the public education system, they're evangelizing them around all sorts of other issues. And it works because young people have this desire to do great things. So if we don't give them a framework about the meaning of their life, God's heart for them, then they're going to be sucked into the various other forms of ideologies. So you're right. We need to create these pods of young people that come out of our schools ready to become fully what God's called them to be.
One of the things that really hit me as you and I had kind of getting to know each other via email and everything is I really became aware that I can speak for me, but I have a feeling I'm not alone in this, that in terms of Catholic education outside of North America, I'm fairly uninformed.
Yeah.
I know what's going on in the United States and Canada. That's where my focus is. You know, we have the NCEA, Duke and Altum schools, a lot of different organizations that speak to our context rather here. But what about Catholic education in places not like home? What are you seeing? What countries have you visited and what are you seeing there?
So I would say, look, I've spoken pretty much all over the world, from Iceland to London to all through Asia. At the macro level, so I'm a sort of a macro thinker, like a top level thinker, in the sense of I look at the macro forces driving what's happening. So often in seminars, I'll talk about the three crisis model. I first read it from George Weigel, but I think it's got deeper roots. So the three crisis model is that the church has faced three great crises in a history. First crisis was, and each of these crises is framed in a question. First crisis was in the early centuries of the church, and the question was, what is God? What is the nature of God? So you look at the Arian heresies, and there were these 300 or 400 year battles about the nature of God, and it mattered because if you were going into the Colosseum or into the Circus Maximus to be ripped apart by a lion, you wanted to know that you were giving your life to something real. So it took 300 or 400 years to resolve that question. Second great crisis is the Reformation. So that question is, what is the nature of the church, right? So you got the first question, what is the nature of God? What is the nature of the church? You get the Counter-Reformation. And the question that we're in now is, what is the nature of the human person? So, and we're in the early stages of this, like as Churchill would say, we're not at the end, we're not at the beginning or at the end of the beginning. We're in the early phases of this. So the first thing I put in place is at the macro level globally, most of the big issues around education and the purposes of education are embedded in that question. So much of my work at the moment with teachers is around basic Christian anthropology, because until you get an accurate anthropology, or as John Paul II said on September 5, 1979, and until you get an adequate anthropology, you'll get everything else wrong to a greater or lesser degree. So that's the first piece. What's happening throughout the world is a battle over what it means to be human. And it plays out obviously in the gender space and those issues that are now starting to really affect schools. The next big pieces are around bureaucracy and technocracy. So in the absence of a spiritual impetus, it seems that the education piece collapses into some form of bureaucracy or technocracy. So there's a great quote from a guy called Petronius Arbiter in 210 BC, where he basically said, we tend to meet any new situation by reorganizing, and a wonderful system it can be for creating the illusion of progress while creating only inefficiency, disillusion, and demoralization. So a lot of times in the big systems, big education systems, there's an endless reinvention of just the next review, the next program, the next platform. There's this endless tinkering with systems and programs and busy work, like so in my country, different to the United States, there is just so much money in Catholic education, right? It is a vast cash cow, like billion-dollar budgets. I remember going to one Catholic education office in America, and they had 3 staff.
Mm-hmm.
I work with one office here that's got, I don't know, 1,700 staff,
Wow.
across 32,000 teachers on a billion-dollar budget. So yeah, I think we're in a battle for what it means to be human. We're in a battle to ask great questions about what education really is, because I just think the danger with the programs is that principals and directors can dangle this stuff in front of parents and say, look what we're doing. But are we turning out saints? Are we, and be really honest, we took our kids out of the system. We took our daughter out in the 9th grade for homeschooling, and because we couldn't put our trust in the system as it was. And, that's why I think what you guys are doing is so important, so powerful. So that's a long answer. But I think it's called mission drift, right?
Right.
Like there's a brilliant book on military history. My brother's one of my older brothers is an amateur sort of military historian. And I said, what's the greatest book on military strategy you ever read? And he told me, and I said, what was it about? And he said, well, the key principle for the greatest generals was something called selection and maintenance of aim, that you select what matters and then you maintain it under all sorts of pressures and challenges. So we need to have conversations around, why does a Catholic school exist? And I teach people this. I go, you go back to Paul VI, Evangelii Nunciandi, famous 2 sentences. He just says, the Catholic Church does not have a mission, full stop, period. And then he says, she is a mission. The church doesn't have a mission. It's not that there is a Catholic Church that then went looking for something to do. She is a mission in her identity. She's constituted as a mission. And Catholic education has 0 reason for existence outside of the mission of the church. And there's a quote from John Paul II talking to the bishops of Lombardy, where he basically said, look, Catholic schools are not just a little side hustle in the pastoral mission of bishops. Like they are an integral aspect of the church's one and only mission, which is, I expressed it to people like this: the mission of the church and the mission of education is that the Father wants his kids back. The whole Christian message is redemption. It's God interrupting human history, breaking into it because he wants his kids back. And so, yes, Catholic education will form the person, integral education, prepare people for meaningful work, but all of that is constituted towards redemption. So that's the end of my homily. Sorry, that's a long one, but
Oh, that's really good stuff. I just love that phrase, the Lord wants his kids back. And
yeah,
that's all of the kids, even down through the schools.
100%.
And, so with your travels, it sounds to me, we'd like to have a little bit of your problem with, as far as the cash
Yeah.
part,
Yeah.
being not very, we're kind of cash poor in most Catholic schools.
Yeah.
And especially teacher salaries are way low.
Yep.
What other things, when you travel to Asia, when you travel to Europe, what do you see going on there?
I think the best things that are happening is pretty much what you guys are doing. I think in the absence of individual great leadership in the existing system, then most schools are in some kind of maintenance mode. Getting everyone to Harvard is not the goal of education. It's fine if it happens. It's not a bad thing. But look, in general, when you ask what do I think is happening, I think I think that the system is operating primarily as a credentialing system with a Catholic veneer. That's
Okay.
what I honestly think. And I've got to the age now where I'm just starting to tell the truth. It may mean I never work anywhere again, but you know, and I think people would push back and say that's not true. There are many wonderful men and women doing great work in Catholic schools, and they're saintly, and they're often, my experience again in this country has been they feel very isolated and hidden
Hmm.
against many colleagues who are not, they're people of goodwill, as John Paul would say, but they're not passionate, vocational Catholic educators. I'm not saying they're bad people, but so in that, I think that the system is at risk here and overseas, from what I've seen in the United Kingdom, in Asia, of becoming a credentialing system with Catholic icing, or as I express it. And as has always happened in history, you're starting to get these responses, such as what you guys are doing. We're seeing it here in Australia. We're seeing people begin to create initiatives and ideas outside the existing system.
There's a book that has really, I think, taken hold in a lot of places around here, produced by the University of Mary, called From Christendom to Apostolic Mission.
Okay.
And one of the things that that book really emphasizes is that we're in a major global shift, that the idea of Christendom is no longer present. The idea of whether it be the United States or any place else, that we're basically a Christian country and all of these Judeo-Christian values are present and everything. But it's kind of a return to more of the mission of the first century, the
Yeah.
apostolic mission that Jesus and the 12 undertook, along with the accompaniment of the early church later on. And this has got to impact the structures that you were talking about earlier. What do you foresee as our world continues to maybe move away from a Christendom kind of orientation? What is Catholic education? What will it look like, do you think?
So on the macro level, as we move from, there's some really great books at the moment. You can look at books like Pagan America, and there's another one I'm reading at the moment. I'll pull it up on my phone in a sec. The default human setting outside of the gospel is paganism, tribalism, and death. And if that's confronting for people, well, go and read Tom Holland's book Dominion. That the default human setting is paganism, human sacrifice, power, tribe, family, and death. So I've been saying to people more and more recently, I keep referring to the Catholic proposition, because the church offers propositions on all aspects of reality, on human relationships, on being human, anthropology, science, all sorts of different things. And I'm going, if you can find a better one, go for it. So my postgrad background very much based in a deep dive in Nietzsche and Freud and Marx. We're seeing a global reascendancy of Marxism, but it's not really Marxism. What it really is Gnosticism, and it's really important that people understand that piece. There's a brilliant book from John Grabowski at University of America, Catholic University of America, Unraveling Gender, which does that brilliantly,
Right.
and I really recommend that book to people. It's a great book. So all of that is my way of saying, if you're looking for a reason, to recommit to missionary activity, do it for that reason. Do it for the fact that the rejection of God does not lead to Marxist utopia. It leads to the gulag and it leads to the gas chamber. So that's what's happening globally, and that's what's in play, this question about what it means to be human. I think what's going to happen in education, look, honestly, Father Andy, I genuinely believe the system will collapse within the next 50 to 100 years. And it has to, because its trajectory is increasing complexity on finite resources. And you just cannot keep adding more and more demands on people, on teachers, on their time, on their creativity, on their behavioral management stuff they got to do, all the pastoral issues that young people are dealing with. It's more and more and more and more complexity. So that's going to break. And also we have to realize that, as I said before, the model that we have is just one of any possible kind of models. We have an education system based on the Prussian military model, and people can research it. They literally in the early 20th century, because it was the US that drove it, because as technology improved on farms, we didn't need as many kids to go and work on family farms, and the American cities started to get bigger, so you had a new clerical class, and you had more and more need for administrators and people to be trained in that stuff. So we looked around, and we really just looked for a model, and this idea of grouping people by age and this sort of group size and lining up and standing behind desks, it's just one system under many possible systems. So I think what will take its place, well, there's two pieces. One will be the Lindisfarne model, little communities like what you guys are doing, vibrant, small, convinced, coherent communities that love Christ, love his church, love young people, and build great communities. The other disruptive piece is technology. So since we started homeschooling, the quality of what's available is extraordinary. And, Jordan Peterson's just launched an online university on the 9th of September, $500 a year. So the AI technology piece is going to get a lot of people to go, oh, hang on, I can access really good stuff. But what they can't do with that, again, is what you guys are doing, is they can't build really great communities. I think technology will take you so far with that, but you need human interaction. You need communities where you celebrate together, you have fun together, you grieve and carry each other's burdens in a physical, embodied form. So there's a lot in that, but yeah, I think the world is at a really pivotal point, and I think there is hope in what you guys are doing, what smaller communities are doing.
As you were kind of sharing about Jordan Peterson and all of that, I started thinking back to one of my communication heroes by the name of Marshall McLuhan.
Yeah,
And he was a communications theorist. One of the things that he said is that technology, and he even started with the pen, is an extension of the human person. That the pen is nothing without the person behind it. And I think the same is true with technology. And perhaps we have given too much power to technology rather than seeing what's behind it, which is again a person. I don't know.
Well, Aquinas said that the hand is the conjoined instrument of the mind. So, what we write and the instrumentality of the pen is, as you said, it's an extension of the human person. The technology piece is so interesting. Like, I think COVID taught us this, things like Substack. You can see the battles going on around the world at the moment around free speech and technology, like with what Elon Musk is facing in Brazil. A lot of what's happened recently in the United Kingdom. They're trying to bring in a law here at the moment on banning social media for kids here in Australia. So what I think is happening is that the existing power structures are genuinely afraid of a disintermediated communications ecosystem. So look, by that I just mean that good ideas, human ideas, are accessible in ways that is important. I think we can find fellow travelers and like-minded people in some ways more easily, like in what we're doing right now, this conversation. So yeah, I think the technology piece can be very interesting, but it won't trump the human element, the need for human community and relationship.
I think it's interesting that we have all of this emphasis on technology, but yet psychologists, especially those working with children, say that we're now basically bringing out a generation of young people in deep depression who have very little social skills. They're lacking any stability. They cannot handle a lot of the pressures of just a normal day. And that again is where I guess the human touch, classroom, community, all of that can offset so much of the negativism that can be bred through just being on social media and fearing, the FOMO thing, fear of
Mm.
missing out
Yeah.
syndrome, for example.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this morning. Like our kids are 17, 15, and 14. And and we're as disciplined as we can be. But for parents now, the problem with the technology addiction and gaming and Instagram and all of that is parents have to, in some ways, have to resign themselves to this war of endless exhaustion and attrition because you're constantly having to say no, 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 and you get worn down by it. So yeah, there's just in a healthy school, great Catholic educators can do important stuff like calling students back to high standards, um, the character piece. So I've been teaching a lot on that the last few weeks on, you know, leadership as influence, influence as character, character as choices, like helping young people or discover the nexus between a sort of action and being, right? So what they do is shaping who they become. What they read is shaping who they become. What they watch is shaping who they become. That Aristotelian bit where our virtues, we have to practice them. And the problem with technology for young people is it often silos them, right? It just withdraws them from human interaction into a kind of, you know, netherworld of where they're siloed into a kind of, yeah, an individualism that can lead to almost a narcissism. So we're, as a species, like I often say in seminars, firstly, we're Capax Dei ontologically, like we are that which has the capacity for God. And we're also communio personarum, right? We're made in the image of the Trinity, which means ontologically at our deepest level, we are relational. And you break that relationship piece. And I say to people, what's the number one worst possible punishment in prison, right? Solitary
Mhm.
confinement. We are made for relationship. And social media mirrors it and parodies it, but it will never meet the fundamental human need for genuine human relationships.
You spend a good amount of time here in North America. I know you travel here periodically to minister and to preach, to teach, all of that. Um, and are there things that we're taking for granted as educators here in America that are real gifts to us that we weren't aware of, or maybe we've just grown too used to having them around?
So I am an unashamed booster of these here United States. I love your country and I love your people. And I genuinely think that the concept of American exceptionalism, there is something special about that country. There is something special about that country. And I just finished reading a 1,000-page biography of Ulysses Grant,
Hmm.
and just had such an impact on me. And I read a great deal, but that book had a big impact on me. And so the first thing is that I felt from my first visit that there is something very special about this country, something that, I'll be honest, something that Satan hates. I think that the enemy would love nothing more than to see America descend into absolute mediocrity and dysfunction and tribal conflict. So my experiences of coming there, I remember one morning I was in Washington, and I'm a very early riser and do a lot of training. So I went for a run up to the Lincoln Memorial, and often when people go there, it's very crowded, but I got there very early, and I had it to myself, and the sun came through and lit up that incredible statue there of Lincoln, and I was very moved. I really was. So the first thing I'd say is that the American project is worth fighting for. It really is. And what I've seen of Catholic education, I can't lie to you. I have seen a warmth and a welcome and a hospitality and a goodness that I just think is wonderful. And every time I come there, I feel like I'm coming home. And we've genuinely, and we're still looking at perhaps moving to the States for a while. But it's ironic, right? Like it's actually really hard for us to get immigration visas and access, given some of the current issues you're facing. It's almost impossible for people like me to get in the country. But what are you taking for granted? Oh, there's just this. Australia is a very cynical country, and the theory behind it is because of being formed as a convict nation. There was a great disdain for authority and a kind of sadness, almost a grief in our founding story. So often when I'm working with teachers here, you've got to break down that cynicism. Being optimistic and positive is hard here, but over there's an energy and an optimism. Americans in general seem to want people to win. They want, you know, they want people to succeed and to do big things. It's a magnanimous spirit. So I think you just had your Eucharistic revival. If I was given advice, I would just say press in, become saints, go to confession, get to mass, live your faith with everything you can. And Aquinas was asked, how do you become a saint? And I love this story because, he wrote the Summa, right? He wrote 86 volumes. So I'm thinking if I was Aquinas and someone said, how do you become a saint? You'd write another treatise, right? You'd write another volume. But he famously said two words. He said, will it, desire it. So my fundamental message for teachers and to anyone listening in the States is become what you are, want what God wants for you, because your schools are precious and you are doing great work. You really are. There's a love for young people that I've seen in American schools and a collegiality that I think is really healthy. And I know it's not perfect. I'm sure some are listening going, oh, well, you don't see behind the scenes. Maybe I don't, but you've got something special and you've got to fight for it.
I think that's key. And perhaps that's one of the things that we do take for granted is we do have some good things going for us here. And so there's kind of this always looking for where the errors are to fix those, which is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
But not to realize, okay, but we really are making good progress. We are seeing some things happen. I think again with Duke Altum schools, just the number of schools that are joining us that are like-minded, wanting to be mission-driven, wanting their teachers to be hired for mission, and wanting the teachers to basically help to form disciples. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
100%. It's not complex, is it? When you actually strip it back, it's like we don't have a mission. We don't have a mission. We are a mission. And I often say to teachers, would it be enough for you, right? I often use that phrasing. I say, when you get to the end of your life, would it be enough for you to realize that you had missio Dei, you had participated in the mission that the Father has for the world? Because, like I said before, we see all these influences and superstars, and I think it's easy to look at that world and think, oh, what I'm doing isn't that important, but getting souls home to heaven for eternity, that's kind of a big deal, And even the evangelization is crucial, but even just like I said at the start, forming friendships. There's a lot of very lonely kids, just who suffer, who come from real hardships, and great teachers can just, in the act of being good, integrated friends, can be a great blessing. So, we just have to do what Mother Teresa did, right? Which is just got to stay super close to Christ. Like that's what teachers have to do. Like, yes, you can improve your professional skills, and you should become truly excellent. If you really understand the vocational aspect of being a Catholic educator, then the pursuit of excellence is not arrogance. It's not hubris. It's an appropriate response to the gravity and the magnitude of what you've been entrusted with. So if you're teaching math, then, I say to people, on what grounds would you exclude yourself from being the absolute best possible math teacher you could be? So become the best, pursue excellence, because it will allow you to love people more effectively and to serve them more.
One of the things that really got me excited as I looked over your website and everything is you have a lot of resources that teachers can go to. Tell me about Is it a daily podcast?
Yeah. So over the years, like my heart is speaking and teaching. I've done everything, as you know, from the NCA convention, which I think we had about 10,000 in the room. So I've done everything from 10,000 teachers plus. And I once joked that my smallest audience was two guys and a dog. That was in outback Queensland. We had a parent night and two guys and a dog came. So look, speaking is my thing. Karen, my wife, you know, I've been a part of it, but have built a huge resource base. So I do, yeah, daily podcast and video. So on YouTube at One Catholic Teacher, I'm usually putting out a video a day, just short, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, a daily podcast for teachers. And then the resource side of the business is huge. It's 10 times what I do. So, for example, in Australia at the moment, the federal government has just mandated something called consent and respectful relationships education, um, based on sexual assault stuff and the idea of toxic masculinity. They've mandated every school in the country, including Catholic schools, has to teach on this. So Karen and her team have just built this massive program from kindergarten to year 12, with a full Christian anthropology responding to this stuff. So we've done stuff on, we're the biggest provider of faith-based puberty education. So every Catholic school in the country has to teach puberty education. So we've created a huge resource for that that's in hundreds of schools. And now we do this cool thing where we do virtual parent nights. So we actually have a huge number of schools where they dial in on Zoom, all the parents, all the kids, and we deliver it online in the evening in their homes, and respecting parents as primary educators. So yeah, the resource side is huge for us. We've got resources in just about every sort of sector of the curriculum.
And you have
That's
the
where
book.
my hair went. That's where my hair went.
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
it's been busy.
Tell me about the Tools and Fuels book
Yeah.
that's for teachers, because uh, among in the subtitle, that burnout piece really was highlighted to me in my
Yeah.
heart.
So the key things of that book were, the mantra that I use from that book is that you cannot do a supernatural task with natural resources. So why does burnout happen? Well, it's complex. Burnout is a complex phenomena, but I think I frame the question for people. So why didn't Mother Teresa burn out, right? Or why didn't she become cynical? Now, she did have periods of spiritual aridity. Like, she definitely had a dark night experience that went for about 6 years, but she didn't become cynical. She never got to the point of, oh, this is all too much and I'm sick of these poor people. And so that leads to the question, what did she know that we may have forgotten? The tagline Tools and Fuels comes from, I was in a 236-kilometer bike race, which I think is maybe 180 miles or something. And I got to this massive climb, this mountain, and I had a whole bunch of problems with my gearing on my bike, but I got, I could still get it finished, but I didn't get my nutrition right. So I ended up using the wrong stuff and got really nauseous and sick. And I realized that the problem on that ride wasn't my tools, the problem was my fuels. And then I extrapolated that for teachers and I said, our problem isn't tools. Like, I don't think too many principals or teachers are sitting around thinking everything would be perfect if we just had a new set of computers. Everything would be radically fixed if we just had this particular resource. There is a place for resources, there's a place for computers, but I don't think we have a tools problem, because a great teacher doesn't even need a textbook. Like, a great teacher can just teach. And so we don't have a tools problem, we have a fuels problem. And the fuels problem is, if you break the spiritual nexus, and specifically from a Catholic point of view, if the Eucharist is the source and summit, and you break enough people away from that, but then keep expecting them to discharge a spiritual task, they're going to run out of grace, right? And that's going to happen differently for every different person, because depending on a person's psychology, temperament, family background, extroverts will survive longer than introverts. So tools and fuels simply means we need the sacramental life of the church. And it's obvious because that's what the saints did. Like the saints did these remarkable things, not because they were created in a factory in heaven with supernatural abilities. They were human, they were like us, but through experience and circumstance and providence, they responded. Augustine has a great quote where he says, "He who made you without your cooperation will not save you without your cooperation." So we didn't get a vote if we got created, but we do get a vote if we want to participate and cooperate with what God's doing. So if you want to survive, if you want to thrive and not just survive the Catholic education vocation, then just do what the saints did. Just figure out where the grace is and immerse yourself there. Because otherwise, it's eventually on your own personal resources over time, and they're finite.
Once at a conference, I heard somebody say that without using your term, without the fuels, we basically are half-fill buckets trying to overflow.
That's good. And I feel it. Like, I tell you the truth, I've burned out probably twice. I'm an extreme introvert. Like, I'm on the irony of God putting me on stage all the time is never lost on me, right? So I have to watch this so carefully. I've got a strong monastic streak in me. Like, and I spent time with the Carmelites before I was married. Like, I am preaching to myself all the time because, Karen's amazing. I'm married to a extroverted stoic, and I'm a introverted, HSP, like highly sensitive to my environment and stress and noise. And even you put me in a noisy restaurant, I'll struggle. So I've had to learn and I have to practice these rhythms of what Karen calls rhythms of renewal. Like if I don't get silence, if I don't get prayer, if I don't get the sacraments, then I'm a danger to myself and others.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm serious. I'm preaching to myself. Like I cannot survive. That's why I love my Catholic faith, because I think the Catholic Church, without any question, more than any institution in history, has just absolutely figured out what it is to be human, and has figured out our weaknesses, our potential for magnificence, and has created, has revealed to us a sacramental life that just, John of the Cross said that the church is the great mother who keeps the children together on the journey. If you think sometimes you go into an airport and you'll see a family, and the dad will be like trying to watch, sports on ESPN on his phone, and you'll see the mother walking along and she's shepherding all the kids and moving them along, and she knows she's got to get them through. And I think that's what the church can do for us.
Jonathan, thank you so much for everything you've shared tonight. This is absolutely fantastic. If people want to avail themselves of your resources, your podcast, and all of that, do you have a web presence that they can go to?
Yeah, so the simplest way is the website itself, which is jonathandoyle.co.co. jonathandoyle.co. So most of the links are there. YouTube, I think you'll find me at One Catholic Teacher, letter O, letter N, letter E, One Catholic Teacher. I think if you just any podcast platform, if you look for Jonathan Doyle Catholic Teacher Podcast, you'll find me there. And Instagram, I try to use for kingdom purposes. I think it's basically a cesspool of depravity, but I try and bless people there, so they can find me at J Doyle Speaks, one word, J Doyle Speaks. But yeah, website's probably the best, jonathandoyle.co. And thank you for your patience, because I've been I look, I don't get to talk about this enough, and to be open and honest. So apologies if I've been preaching to the choir, but it's been a real privilege to share my heart with people tonight.
Oh, it's been a delight for us as well. And you're going to be here in the United States in October, I believe.
Yes, we are bringing the whole family, because I didn't want to spend too much time in purgatory, so I'm bringing the whole family on the plane, which will be great for my sanctity. We're going to have we arrive on October 6th in San Francisco, and we are speaking in San Fran to all the principals and leaders there, and then a big event in Detroit. That's a few thousand people for that one, and then I'm speaking in Texas again and Florida. So people are interested, and often I can people want to come along. I can find a way to make that happen. But if they reach out through the website, we can give them more information.
That's
looking
wonderful.
forward to it.
Oh.
Well, we're excited about your election. It's going to be interesting times in the States.
Yes,
so
indeed.
We're praying the Lord's will is done there, but praying for America and for all you great people.
Jonathan, thank you again so much for being with us. This has been such a delight. And of course, for more information about Duke and Altum Schools Collaborative, please visit our website at diaschools.org. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow our podcast. And be sure to leave a comment to encourage us toward future programs. May Almighty God bless you.
We'd like to thank you for joining us on this episode of Follow to Lead, a production of the Duke and Altum Schools Collaborative. To learn more about finding your own path in your journey of faith, or for more information on what we discussed in today's episode, you are invited to follow us on social media and visit us on the web at diaschools.org. To provide a one-time donation or monthly pledge, please visit our website. Your gift will aid us in providing up-to-date information, additional resources, and other support on how to take Catholic education to a higher level. We look forward to helping you follow God's call to lead others to God right here on Follow to Lead.